Good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you might be. My name is Kevin Michael Grace, and this is the KMG show. I'm going to start off today by talking about girl bosses. Yeah, they actually call themselves that, or some people do. Uh, yes, did I introduce the show? Yes, my name is Kevin Michael Grace. It's the KMG show for Thursday, September the 16th. Yes, girl bosses, or the Powerpuff girls, as I call them. And of course, this week we see the beginning of the prosecution, the trial of Elizabeth Holmes of Theranos infamy. Elizabeth Holmes dropped out of Stanford, I believe at the age of 19, and she had a billion-dollar idea, or bigger than $1 billion idea. And the idea was that little prick of blood from the finger would be sufficient to do a great deal of diagnostic work. Previously, deep vein blood was needed. Elizabeth Holmes claimed that she had always been terrified of needles, but of course, this was one of her many lies. Holmes has been described as a sociopath by many, many people. Of course, it all ended in tears, but Elizabeth Holmes claims that she is the victim of domestic abuse by her partner, both personal and professional, named Ramesh Balwani, or Sunny, as she called him. She was the chairwoman and CEO. He was the president and COO. And this is a woman who reached the top in attracting venture capital in biotech. So, of course, this is an example of sexism. Well, who says so? Well, lots of women are saying it, but let's go with Ellen Powell, who has an essay in the New York Times called "The Sexism That Led to the Elizabeth Holmes Trial." And it's illustrated with a picture of her, Elizabeth Holmes, looking, well, deranged as usual. Ellen Powell is described as a tech investor and chief executive Project Include, a diversity, equity, and inclusion nonprofit. She is also the author of Reset, My Fight for Inclusion and Lasting Change, about her lawsuit against a venture capital firm and her experience running the technology company Reddit. Ellen Powell begins, Elizabeth Holmes followed the Silicon Valley playbook to a T. She was focused and ambitious. She had a compelling vision to help humanity with technology for blood tests. And her ambition, she said, was driven by her personal fear of needles. Again, she lied about that. She fit the pattern of the young, brilliant college dropout, even dressing like Steve Jobs. Yes, that should have been a giveaway. When she founded the unconventional blood testing company Theranos in 2003, unconventional, that's one way to put it. Scam would perhaps be a better way. I was relieved to see a woman finally benefit from the hyperbole that dominates venture investing, a world I worked in for 9 years total. Why wouldn't a woman show the same single-minded confidence that her male peers did? By 2015, Holmes raised more than $400 million in financing, and Theranos was valued at $9 billion. At last, I thought, a charismatic woman with a compelling vision, actually able to raise huge amounts of funding at astronomical valuations. But after it was revealed that Theranos was not transparent when its blood testing equipment failed, it became clear that the company would be the exception that proves the rule that tech chief executives rarely face the full consequences of the harm they cause. Yet Holmes is also exceptional for the basic fact that she is a woman. Time and again, we see that the boys' club, that is the tech industry, supports and protects its own, even when the costs are huge. And when the door cracks open ever so slightly to let a woman in, the same rules don't apply. Indeed, as Holmes' trial for fraud continues in San Jose, it's clear that two things can be true. She should be held accountable for her actions as chief executive of Theranos, and it can be sexist to hold her accountable for alleged serious wrongdoing and not hold an array of men accountable for reports of wrongdoing or bad judgment. Well, you see the fallacy here, the very obvious fallacy. Apparently, men have gotten away with wrongdoing in Silicon Valley. So it is grossly unfair that Elizabeth Holmes is facing jail time. I mean, this would be the equivalent argument is, why are you prosecuting me for murder when we know that there are thousands, tens of thousands of murderers running free on the streets who've never even been arrested? If we were to apply this kind of rule, then society would collapse almost overnight. But Ellen Powell continues, questionable, unethical, even dangerous behavior is run rampant in the male-dominated world of tech startups. Though never charged with crimes, WeWork's Adam Newman and Uber's Travis Kalanick hyped their way into raising over $10 billion for their companies, claiming they would disrupt their stagnant, tired industries. Well, WeWork was a complete bust, of course, and I never really understood what its business plan was supposed to be. We're renting offices. Renting offices, that's pretty disruptive. No one has ever thought of that before. Uber certainly did disrupt, for better or worse, the taxi industry. Remember the accusations of harassment, privacy violations, price gouging, misleading advertising, and any of the other dozens of scandals at Uber? How about the genocide incited on Facebook in Myanmar? What? Or its engagement-centric approach that led to the proliferation of anti-vaccine propaganda on the platform. Oh, yes, Mark Zuckerberg should be in prison because anti-mask and anti-vax skeptics are allowed on platform. Meanwhile, a Tesla employee reportedly described part of a Tesla manufacturing plant as a predator zone for women. News reports recount allegations of racist threats, effigies, sure, effigies, and humiliation against Black workers. Tesla has told the Times there is no evidence of a pattern of discrimination and harassment. Elon Musk, Tesla's chief executive, did get his hand slapped for fraud, only it was by the Securities and Exchange Commission, which banned him from posting on Twitter without supervision from Tesla's lawyer. And then we have, vaping. Yes, okay, Juul, Alto Pharmacy, and other examples. But let's get to the power imbalance between mostly male investors and female entrepreneurs hasn't seemed to shift much less in a way that would empower or protect founders. In an industry where women founders receive only 11% of the seed through early stage funding and 64% of venture capital firms in the US do not have any female partners, we should not be surprised. When you consider intersectional data, the bias is even more damning. Venture capitalists only gave a paltry 0.34% of funding within the United States to Black women founders in the first 6 months of this year. Sexism in tech is real and alive. These problems can't be ignored or pretended away. If the members of the Investors Boys Club won't hold each other accountable, prosecutors must step in, as they're doing now with Elizabeth Holmes. I suppose we could ask a similar question about Ellen Powell's ex-husband or ex-husband. It's rather unclear. Okay, well, let's talk about. We'll get into Ellen Powell and her Black gay husband in a little while. I could point out that one of the main whistleblowers, one of the women who was responsible, one of the persons who was responsible for taking down Theranos, was an employee there named Erica Chung, who endured quite a bit. Because when you have as much money to throw around as Elizabeth Holmes did at Theranos, you can hire lawyers like David Boies to put the fear of God into anyone who dares suggest that what you're doing is, fraudulent. But yes, Ellen Powell, born 1970, is described by Wikipedia as an American investor and former CEO of social media company Reddit. She first became known in 2012 for filing an unsuccessful gender discrimination suit against her employer, venture capital firm Kleiner Perkins, and has continued to express vocal criticism of the hiring and promotion practices in Silicon Valley. In 2014, she became interim CEO of Reddit, and she was very quickly bounced from there after a revolt by Redditors against her censorship of, spicy opinions. So Ellen Powell has a whole bunch of degrees in electrical engineering and other things. She worked as a corporate attorney at Cravath, Swaine and Moore, and then at Web TV. And she joined Kleiner Perkins in 2005, where she had an affair with a male married co-worker. And yes, her lawsuit alleged workplace retaliation by a male junior partner resulting from his and Powell's romantic affair. So she sued and she lost. Kind of unusual, I would think. Powell subsequently founded the nonprofit organization Project Include with Erica Baker, Tracy Chow, Frida Kapoor Klein, and 4 other women in the technology business. Aimed at startups with 25 to 1,000 employees, the group develops human resources advice in a series of meetings with clients and publishes anonymized progress reports under a Creative Commons license. Yes, so she is now an NGO SPIV. Powell married Roger Coe. They later divorced. She then married Buddy Fletcher. They met through Aspen Institute functions during the summer of 2007 after they were both appointed Crown Fellows. Powell and Fletcher have 1 daughter. Powell is a vegetarian. Buddy Fletcher, born 1965, is described as an American former hedge fund trader and founder of the Fletcher Foundation. Of course, he has a foundation. He began his career as a quantitative equity trader at Bear Stearns and later worked at Kidder Peabody and Co. Fletcher, who is African American, sued Kidder Peabody for racial discrimination. Although his racial discrimination claims were dismissed, he eventually won an arbitration award of $1.26 million. Fletcher has also been involved in litigation centered on a dispute with the board of the Dakota apartment building in New York City. Of course, John Lennon was shot to death outside the Dakota where he lived, and the Dakota was featured quite menacingly in Roman Polanski's horror classic, Rosemary's Baby. Oh, fund bankruptcy. Uh-oh. In 2011, FIA Leveraged Fund, an investment vehicle managed by Fletcher Asset Management, was unable to meet a redemption request totaling $144 million by 3 Louisiana pension fund investors. In April 2012, the Grand Court of the Cayman Islands ruled that the fund was insolvent and ordered that it be wound up, liquidated. Oh, yeah, in 2013, the IRS filed a $1.4 million income tax lien against Fletcher. So Steve Saylor has been following the adventures of Powell and Fletcher for some time. He wrote back in 2015, "We're supposed to take seriously Ellen Powell's gender discrimination lawsuit against the Silicon Valley venture capital firm as a landmark struggle in American social evolution." Here's Claire Kane Miller's latest thumbsucker on the meaning of it all in the New York Times. Even though Ms. Powell's gay, black, broke, and perhaps prison-bound husband, Buddy Fletcher, has been in the newspapers for decades for suing for discrimination. I first read about Buddy Fletcher suing Kidder Peabody in the Wall Street Journal in the early 90s. Powell's lawsuit dodged a bullet when the judge ruled that nobody could mention to the jury how broke ex-hedgy Buddy is, at least on paper, because all that pension money firefighters gave him to manage seems to have vanished. In other words, Powell is allowed to mislead under oath the jury about her motivations, and the defense isn't allowed to point out that she isn't an independently wealthy humanitarian suing out of a disinterested concern for the female sex or gender or whatever you're supposed to call it these days. And Saylor notes, interestingly, I can't find online a picture of the married couple together that doesn't appear to have been photoshopped out of pictures taken separately, even though Buddy Fletcher is a high-profile socialite who gets his picture taken frequently at parties and events. In 2019, Saylor wrote, Ellen Powell and Buddy Fletcher are back. A few years ago, Ellen Powell's discrimination lawsuit against the Silicon Valley Venture Capital Fund was heavily promoted in the national press as proving that the only reason most tech founders are male is because of bias. But then she lost bigly. Now Powell is divorcing her gay, black, disgraced financier husband, Alphonse Buddy Fletcher. And apparently this divorce has been going on, it's been going on for 2 years as of 2019. Yes, Fletcher started facing questions from investors, including 3 Louisiana pension funds that had invested with Fletcher and Asset Management on promises of double-digit returns. That kicked off a series of legal battles and bankruptcy filings that ended up detonating Fletcher's reputation as a financial wizard. After his main fund filed for bankruptcy in 2012, it emerged that he had been insolvent for years and had misspent investors' money, including $8 million to produce Violet and Daisy, a film directed by his Oscar-winning writer brother. Those details came out in a 2013 report by the Manhattan Federal Bankruptcy Trustee, who likened the case to a Ponzi scheme. So, Buddy Fletcher owned 4 apartments in the Dakota, which is a co-op, and then he sought to buy a 5th. And the management of the Dakota said, no, you don't have the money to do so. So what did he do? He filed suit claiming he was refused permission to buy the 5th apartment because he's African American. The case was ultimately dismissed, but not before it was reported that Dakota rejected Fletcher for a 5th apartment because of investments firm's apparent lack of profitability. It's grifters all the way down. Now, I will point out that it was a woman, and her name is, this is a Greek name, it's kind of hard for me to pronounce, Eleftherios Diamandis, who was a biochemist and a professor. And according to Wikipedia, in 2015, Diamandis performed a deep investigation into claims of Theranos technology and concluded in a report that most of the company's claims are exaggerated. Yes, it was a woman who told Elizabeth Holmes to give up on this project of hers because it was never going to work, for the simple reason that blood taken from a finger prick is bad blood because it's contaminated with sweat and dirt, which is the reason why deep blood is taken for therapeutic analysis. Apparently, these are real people. These are real adults who are taken seriously. This is from Slate, September 16th. Is Theranos founder Elizabeth Holmes still a girl boss? Why would these people want to be called girl bosses? I mean, even a word which is seen to be denigratory, a chick, is far better. I mean, you're a tough chicks, right? But no, they have to be girl bosses, again, like they're Powerpuff girls. Welcome to the Waves Slate's podcast about gender, feminism, and girl bosses. Every episode, you get a new pair of women to talk about the thing we can't get off our minds. And today, you've got me, Shannon Paulus, a senior editor at Slate, covering health and science, and Emily Peck. I co-host Slate's Money podcast. I've basically been leaning in for a long time and also covering leaning in for a long time. Yeah, we could talk about Sheryl Sandberg and how this woman without any apparent talent managed to rise to the position of Facebook chief operating officer. And the reason is, from the time that she entered Harvard, she had very, very powerful men, starting with Lawrence Summers, advancing her interests. So today we're going to talk about girl bosses, women entrepreneurs, and the fall of Elizabeth Holmes, who may or may not be a girl boss. She's currently awaiting trial for fraud. I'm interested in talking about this because I feel like I have been kind of the target audience for a lot of the girl boss stuff. I read Sophia Emma Russo's book, #GirlBoss, when it came out in 2014. I watched the rise of Elizabeth Holmes as Theranos with a mixture of like A&R and jealousy. And over the past few days preparing for this, I've been thinking about why I was so attracted to the hair, especially in Sophia Emma Russo's book. Women are just obsessed with hair. And I think the main thing that drove me to it was that, I was like 24 or 25 when I read that book, and the idea of conjuring a world where you were successful and powerful, really appealed to me. I didn't like my job very much at the time, and I was kind of doing well in hindsight, was like the slow, hard, tedious work of building skills and figuring out where I fit into the journalism world and trying things that didn't work. And being a girl boss in some way, it's just sort of seemed to be like skipping all that. Again, apparently adult women who get published in Slate, they talk like this. So it seems clear that the reason girl bosses caught on for at least a while was because it was a way of softening the woman in authority. Like, she looks perfect. Elizabeth Holmes never looked perfect. Her hair was always a disaster. She's well coiffed. No, she wasn't. So this is a kind of like soften that problem, maybe a solution to that contradiction or whatever. But it's not really a solution. I mean, the problem is all those girl bosses kind of looked a little bit the same. They're all white. Boo! They're all kind of around the same age millennial. They all looked perfect. Ivanka Trump was kind of like the Earth girl boss, or one of them. The whole term makes these women have to carry a lot of weight for feminism when they just want to be bosses of companies. And it's just like, this is capitalism. Like, it's not anything but just people want to be in charge of companies and make money. Yeah. How about that? That's what business is about, making money. The rest of it is just extrinsic, There's a woman who runs AMD, the chip manufacturer, and by all accounts, she has done a very good job at that company. Do you ever read about that woman and her style and how she's a girl boss? No, you don't. No, you don't. Oh, here's something from Venture Beat. The therapy and diagnosis of founder sexism in Silicon Valley. Yes, dubious woman with highly dubious idea comes a cropper after risking people's lives. So, gotta be sexism. This article was written by Aaron Solomon, head of strategy and chief legal analyst for Esquire, a digital. A Harvard Business Review. Oh, wait a minute. Wait. While Theranos is currently a disgraced term, perhaps it could serve a newfound purpose in the innovation community. From the moment Elizabeth Holmes was discovered to have been peddling technology that simply didn't work, there has been a chilling effect on female founders in Silicon Valley and around the world. Well, perhaps one of the reasons could be is that people took a look at the Elizabeth Holmes story. And perhaps they read that excellent book by the Wall Street Journal reporter called Bad Blood. And so it turns out that Elizabeth Holmes would, do something with her eyelashes, and Henry Kissinger and George Shultz and James Mattis, Mad Dog Mattis, and Rupert Murdoch were entranced by her. So, yes, old men like attractive, or kind of attractive young women, and Elizabeth Holmes fit the bill. And billions of dollars went down the drain, and many people were embarrassed. So perhaps there is something to learn from that. Harvard Business Review found that in 2019, 2.8% of funding went to women-led startups. In 2020, that fell to 2.3%. After years of increases, the 2.8% figure, while paltry, was an all-time high. It could be, perhaps, that women are simply not the entrepreneurial type, or not very many of them are. Entrepreneurialism typically involves saying, this thing that I have come up with is going to change the world, and I'm going to bet my life on it, come what may. I would posit that women are more interested in security than this kind of gambling. But back to VentureBeat. As if their struggle hadn't been sufficiently absurd pre-Holmes. Why absurd? There's so many successful high-profile investors, read aging white men, boo, were willing to defy logic to believe in Holmes, has created the false narrative of we won't be fooled again mindset in the investing community. Is it really such a false mindset? Any argument that men have been held to the same standard should result in a laugh so hearty that a stream of juicero comes out through your nose. Oh, yes, and here we go with the whataboutism, that some man came up with some idea that didn't work. So this proves that people are picking on Elizabeth Holmes because she's just a widow girl. And we had also all manner of articles about this. Oh, this is from Kim Elsener, a senior contributor at Forbes, Elizabeth Holmes, and how partner abuse can impact work behavior. So Elizabeth Holmes makes an entirely unsubstantiated claim that Sonny abused her. And, well, of course, she's a woman and believe women. So this is a serial liar. But since she's accusing a man of abuse, she must be believed. And yes, in unsealed court documents, attorneys for Elizabeth Holmes wrote, for over a decade, Holmes and Balwani had an abusive, intimate partner relationship, and Balwani exercised psychological, emotional, and redacted over Holmes. This pattern of abuse and coercive control continued over the approximately decade-long duration of Holmes and Balwani's relationship, including during the period of charged conspiracies. Balwani has denied these allegations. As a result of these allegations, there's speculation that Holmes' defense will suggest that intimate partner abuse contributed to her actions at work. Although many think of domestic violence as a personal issue, it can result in significant repercussions for physical and mental health that impacts work life too. For example, the Center for Disease Control reports that victims of domestic violence lose nearly 8 million days of paid work per year in the U.S., resulting in a $1.8 billion loss in productivity for employers. $1.8 billion. In the context of the American economy, is that a large figure? When you add in the costs of medical care, the cost of domestic abuse rises to a whopping $5.8 billion a year. Just never mind that these figures are entirely made up, bear no relationship to reality. But again, even at $5.8 billion a year, in the context of the American economy, is that a lot of money? California State University professor emeritus Mindy Mechanic is serving as an expert on intimate partner abuse in Holmes' trial. Naturally, Mechanic cannot speak about Holmes' case, but she did offer to share her knowledge about the different ways that domestic violence can play out at work. Although most of us likely think of physical violence when we hear about intimate partner abuse, Mechanic says it's really about control. She points out that physical violence is just one of 4 abusive tactics adopted to control victims. Yes, and of course, women never engage in coercion in order to control men. No, that would be an outrageous suggestion. Let's go to the chat. Hello to Kontiki Roulette, Head McNeck, Dan, a visionary companion, Anrun, a Chogokin, a 666. No Sleep Till Breezewood PA says Theranos is proto-COVID test mania, so being defended by Reddit is fitting. Neil Terry says, sad that due to girl power propaganda these days, a woman doesn't have to be good-looking, competent, or even slightly charming to swindle millions out of people. Hello to Gamion. Steve, according to people who met her, Holmes is incredibly persuasive in person, says Steve. PK Teller says, and hello to you, holding women responsible for their actions is racist. Quachalango says KMG prefers strolling to cycling. Indeed. Halper says all problems are caused by unvaccination, white supremacy, and MMGW. Hello to Oscar Toe. And who else do we have here? Kyle Free, hello to you. Was that really so hard to pronounce? The first name was, yes. Chogokin666 says, I still think Lacey Green is cute and sexy. Lacey with an I. I don't know who that person is, but I don't know. That's an unfortunate Christian name. What about Diamanda Gallus, says Quachulango. Is this a musician? Rather wild woman. Am I right about that? Metal Mike says it evokes images of a Marvel comic villain. Or Lydia Lunch, tough gal, says Quachulango. I know who Lydia Lunch is. I had her record, Queen of Siam. Actually, I still have her record, Queen of Siam. I found it quite interesting and amusing. Chokohin 666 chances General Milley and Fauci face any consequences at all? Survey says no. Metal Mike says, KMG, is this your Valley Girl impression? Yeah, but it's not just Valley Girl anymore, really. The ending every phrase with the up talk, you know, that's become not quite de rigueur, but pretty close. Hello's 2 G's, he style. Okay. Kontiki Roulette says, I love it when a woman opens up one of those pointless Ponzi shops that is filled with useless trinkets that are always empty. Husband getting rinsed for cash because she's bored. It seemed to me that years ago when there were independent bookstores, remember those days? That a great many of them had been opened by women after divorce settlements. Steve says, but men get away with it too as a rather desperate defense. Hello to William Hicks. I remember all the Powderpuff pieces Elizabeth Holmes participated in. CBS's Nora O'Donnell was so sweet, lauding her achievement for being the youngest female billionaire. It was something. Red Sulfur says, real men do not uptalk. Yes, the vocal fry as well. I want to talk about a woman called Mylene Klass, who I've mentioned in this space previously. I've come to the conclusion that she pays the Daily Mail for coverage. She is a celebrity in Britain and has been for quite some time. Exactly what for is an interesting question. She has an Austrian father and a Filipino mother, so she has, I suppose one could say, exotic looks. She has a handsome body, that's it, okay? She was in some manufactured group called Hearsay. She's supposedly a musician, and we keep hearing that she's a classical musician. And let's see. Yes, she has released classical records, but a few years ago, I noted that we saw a video of her, and it was Eric Satie's, one of the Genopidi, and at no point did we see her hands on the keyboard. But nonetheless, in 2007, she signed a record contract with EMI Classics as both a recording artist as an ambassador for the EMI Classics UK roster of artists. Yes, Mylene's Music for Mothers was released on EMI Classics in 2008. That sounds like a very serious album. She appears on all of these shows about nothing. Constant presenter on TV. Oh, of course, she was on I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. And we've learned a great deal about her personal life. She married a bodyguard named Graham Quinn, who turned out to be a heroin addict and a thug. He had his back was entirely covered with tattoos, including one that said, "Only God can judge me," and I shuddered when I saw that. Because any man who says only God can judge me is likely to be judged by judges on a regular basis. But what's the latest with Mylene Class? Well, she loves drag queens, because we all love drag queens now, right? Actually, we don't, but we're being gaslighted into imagining that we do. This is Millie Payne for the Mail. Drag Race UK favorite Veronica Green has teamed up with Mylene Class on her new single, Nothing to Lose. The talented singer and musical theater star, 36, has collaborated with classical music performer Mylene to produce a lush, dramatic ballad, which builds and soars to a bold and surprising ending. This is a news story. Mylene, 43, plays both the piano and harp on the new track. Of course she does. And knew she had to be on it. And there's some pictures of this drag queen and pictures of Mylene back in her 20 years ago in her Hearsay heyday. Veronica released her debut single, Stars, in March, racking up over 40,000 streams. She broke the tradition upheld by most drag race queens, because drag race queens are all about tradition, by debuting a stunning and emotional musical theater ballad. And she has dragged her child into this. Back in May, Mylene celebrated daughter Hiro's birthday. No, she's not Japanese. It's Hero, which of course is male, not feminine, but you know. She celebrated her daughter Hiro's birthday in style as she threw a RuPaul's Drag Race themed bash for her. The radio presenter, her daughters Hero and Ava, 13, as well as her fiance Simon Motson, got all dragged up for the occasion. Making the day extra special for her little girl, Mylene set up a runway in the garden where they had lip sync battles, while Hero also had a special cake and received a special message from Drag Race UK Season 2 queen Bimini Bon Boulash. And we see that the fiancé has a very low effort. He's got a badly fitting dress, and he has a cheap blue wig on his head. I guess he was bullied into this, but we know that women never use coercion to control men. That never happens. It's all the other way around. Mylene furiously hit back a troll who criticized her decision to throw the party. She responded to the troll, who insisted that drag is for adults and she should let kids be kids. Oh, yes. Some drag acts, Mylene thundered, might come with an age limit, but the enjoyment, diversity, inclusivity, skill, and zero judgment, only joy, doesn't. Yeah, that zero judgment, you should have left out that part when you're talking about kids. The kids who came didn't see limitation. They saw vibrance and celebration for being exactly who you want to be. I'm going to be talking later in the show about the philosophy of being exactly who you want to be. My daughter chose the theme. She's been raised by her drag uncles and the alphabet people community since she was born. She chose to celebrate in Technicolor, and her family dived right in to back her. Again, you work in the arts. You should know better than throwing this out there, Mylene said on Instagram. In the words of Domendink, drag is about inclusivity and self-expression. There are children right now struggling with who they are and trying to understand where they fit in. All will not become clear at 18. Inclusivity, tolerance, and understanding starts now. Happy Pride. How long before Mylene Class's daughters enter therapy if they are not in therapy already? But I'm trying to think of that woman, she's Thai, half German, who's constantly in news in the United States, most recently for having fat sucked out of her face, presumably because people said that she looked chipmunk-cheeked. She got into a big bullying scandal, and she's quit drinking or she's drinking again or something like this. And again, no talent, no known talent in these women. But that's the world we live in now. Nicki Minaj, unlikely voice of reason. This is from Breck Dumas at Fox News. Rapper Nicki Minaj told her Instagram followers Wednesday that she has been placed in Twitter jail and will never use Twitter again, but Twitter says the company took no actions against her account. The rapper claims, okay, this is so poorly edited, this next sentence, that I'm not even going to read it because I wouldn't know how to follow it. I'm in Twitter jail, y'all, the artist proclaimed on Instagram. They didn't like what I was saying over there on that block. I guess my poll was going to be asking questions. Is okay. I like being effing dumb, then boom, can't tweet. She had tweeted yesterday, right, I can't speak to, agree with, even look at someone from a particular political party. People aren't human anymore. If you're black and a Democrat tells you to shove marbles up your ass, you simply have to. If another party tells you to look out for that bus, stand there and get hit. Minaj tweeted earlier in the day that the White House had invited her to visit after she revealed her hesitancy to get the COVID-19 vaccine on Twitter earlier in the week. Yes, and Tucker Carlson took this up. The rapper signaled that Fox News' Tucker Carlson was spot on in his assessment of the situation. He explained on Tucker Carlson tonight regarding the uproar, it's not anything to do with the physical effect of the vaccine that makes our political class mad. It's the last part of Nicki Minaj's tweet that enraged them. The part where she says you should pray on it, make the decision yourself like a free human being, and quote, don't be bullied. Make up your own mind. Well, you're not an expert. So you can't make up your own mind because you're not an expert. And again, okay, how do people manage to navigate through life if they're not experts? Well, I guess they listen to what other people have to say about things, and then they make up their own minds. People have been scammed by so-called experts from the beginning of recorded time, and they continue to be scammed by so-called experts today, including by the medical profession. And again, I will note that for 50 years or more, the medical profession insisted that saturated fats were poison. And it's better that you eat sugar instead of saturated fats, or things like palm oil. And it turns out the medical profession got it exactly wrong. And the advice or the bullying that they doled out for half a century led to disastrous health outcomes for Americans and others, and the present epidemic of obesity. Don't expect any apologies from them for this. This is from Variety today. Amid a wave of misinformation, misinformation, stemming from Nicki Minaj's comment Monday that she would not attend the Met Gala that night due to its COVID-19 vaccine requirement. It's an interesting way to introduce this story, Jem Aswad. The White House confirmed that it offered to put her on the phone with a doctor to discuss vaccine safety. Oh, I thought that we were the doctor, not the president or the head of the CDC or the FDA or something, just a doctor. You can go to the internet and you can find plenty of doctors telling you that if you don't get vaxxed, double vaxxed, triple vaxxed, you're a murderer. Seems kind of condescending. Minaj had claimed in an Instagram live session Wednesday that the White House had extended an offer for her to meet with infectious disease expert Dr. Anthony Fauci, whose name she had trouble recalling, and or the Surgeon General, although the White House statement did not address those claims. She did, however, confirm Variety's report earlier this week that she is now managed by Wasim Slaibi, who also manages The Weeknd, Doja Cat, Brandy, and others. Well, now you are all caught up on the latest management news. Here is a piece from The Defender at children'shealthdefense.org. This is by Dr. Peter McCullough, MD, MPH. A groundbreaking preprint paper by the prestigious Oxford University Clinical Research Group, published August the 10th in The Lancet, includes alarming findings devastating to the COVID vaccine rollout. The study found vaccinated individuals carry 251 times the load of COVID-19 viruses in their nostrils compared to the unvaccinated. While moderating the symptoms of infection, the jab allows vaccinated individuals to carry unusually high viral loads without becoming ill at first, potentially transforming them into pre-symptomatic super spreaders. This phenomenon may be the source of the shocking post-vaccination surges in heavily vaccinated populations globally. Yes, that would be the logical conclusion, but it's a conclusion that the formed, the usual suspects, the experts, they're not going to come to that conclusion because it would be deeply embarrassing to them. Instead, vaccines aren't working. What do we got to do? More people need to be vaccinated. Everyone needs to be vaccinated. This is from Christine Marsh at Newsbusters. HBO's real-time host Bill Maher appeared on Jimmy Kimmel Live last night, where he did something rarely heard on late-night talk shows anymore. He mocked both of the liberal media for their misleading, hyperbolic coronavirus coverage and the woke left for buying into it. He said, now the reason why this is relevant, I have to cite a survey that was in the New York Times, which is a liberal paper, so they weren't looking for this answer. But they were talking about, the question was, what do you think the chances are that you would have to go to the hospital if you got COVID? And Democrats thought that it was way higher than Republicans. 41% of Democrats, the answer is between 1% and 5%. 40% of Democrats thought it was over 50%. Another 28% thought it was 20 to 49%. So 70% of Democrats thought it was way, way, way higher than it really was. Liberal media has to take a little responsibility for that, for scaring the shit out of people. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because it's much harder for every touring act to sell tickets in blue states. Kimmel and Stephen Colbert are not experts in any sense, and yet their wit and wisdom is taken as gospel by the same people who excoriate those who won't listen to the experts on masks and social distancing and vaccine. In more Jimmy Kimmel news, this is from David Eng at Breitbart. Jimmy Kimmel once praised Dr. Anthony Fauci as a godsend when the physician appeared on the ABC Late Night Show in May. Now Kimmel and his producers are remaining silent about a recent bombshell report that calls into question Fauci's sworn testimony before members of Congress. Jimmy Kimmel Live is declining to comment on The Intercept's report that found the U.S. government contributed funding to controversial gain-of-function research on bat coronaviruses at the Wuhan Institute of Virology in China. Breitbart News contacted representatives at Disney, which owns ABC, to ask if the late night show had any comment on The Intercept's findings and if the show intends to follow up with Dr. Fauci about the veracity of his sworn congressional testimony. A spokeswoman for Disney hadn't responded to Breitbart by the time this story was published. Oh, well, look, he's just an entertainer. Well, if he's just an entertainer and Stephen Colbert is just an entertainer, or Howard Stern is just an entertainer, then why are they going on their shows and saying that people who are unvaccinated or won't wear masks are monsters and worse? Speaking of idiots, Don Lemon. This is from politicsusa.com. CNN's Don Lemon expressed his frustration with unvaccinated Americans, accusing them of prolonging the COVID-19 pandemic and saying that it's time to, quote, shun them for their inaction. Lemon added that they were, quote, harmful to the greater good. Imagine this: a homosexual excoriating others for being harmful to the greater good. Too funny. Too funny. The people who are not getting vaccines, who are believing the lies on the internet instead of science, it's time to start shaming them or leave them behind. Sounds awfully discriminatory. I thought discrimination was a bad thing. Well, we know who's dying of COVID-19 in the main: old people. In Alberta, which is one of the few jurisdictions to publish this datum, the average age of people dying of COVID is 80. So old people are dying. Really old people are dying. Who else? Fat people. Really fat people. But the media doesn't want to talk about that as well. This is Mary Kekatos at the Daily Mail. 16 U.S. states now have obesity rates of at least 35%, more than ever before, new maps reveal. More than one-third of adults in Alabama, Arkansas, Delaware, Indiana, Iowa, Kansas, Kentucky, Louisiana, Michigan, Mississippi, Ohio, Oklahoma, South Carolina, Tennessee, Texas, and West Virginia were dangerously overweight in 2020, according to data released Wednesday by the CDC. This is nearly double the 9 states in 2018 that saw obesity prevalence at 35% or higher. Racial and ethnic disparities still persist, with 3 times as many states having at least 35% of overweight Hispanic residents compared to overweight whites, and 5 times as many states with at least 35% of overweight Black residents. Well, this answers several questions. Why are more Americans dying per capita than in other jurisdictions, such as Canada, wherever? Fatness. And why are Hispanics and Black people disproportionately affected by COVID? Again, fatness. Now, I'm sure we'll be told soon enough, if we haven't been told already, that there's a conspiracy, a white supremacist conspiracy, to make Hispanics and Black people fat. I don't know. I don't believe it myself. Yes, this is from NBC News, Elizabeth Chuck. Samantha Wendell could not wait for her wedding this summer. For nearly 2 years, the 29-year-old surgical technician had been meticulously planning every detail, from the seating chart to the Tiffany blue floral arrangements. Her fiancé, Austin Eskew, said they wanted to start a family as soon as they got married. Eskew, a correctional sergeant, said the couple of Grand Rivers, Kentucky, hoped to eventually have 3, maybe 4 children. So when the COVID-19 vaccines came out and some of Wendell's co-workers said the shots caused infertility, an unfounded claim that has gained ground despite top reproductive health groups refuting it, she just kind of panicked, Eskew said. Wendell decided they should hold off on their vaccinations. It was a choice that cost her life. Instead of attending her wedding, which was supposed to be August 21st, her family is now planning her funeral. And there are pictures of this unfortunate woman in which we see that she was morbidly obese. This is what they call in Latin suppressio veri. That if you don't want to suffer severely from COVID or die, best thing to do is not be fat. But no, it's the unvaccinated who are responsible for this. There were no other considerations involved. I suppose I shouldn't be shocked by this story from Hannah Blow at Breitbart. So Joe Biden is he's willing to kill people to show up the governor of Florida. The Biden administration this week slashed the doses of life-saving coronavirus antibody treatment to Florida, giving the state less than half of what is needed for a routine week, prioritizing equitable distribution, a move some suspect is a form of revenge against Republican governors whom the president vowed to get out of the way. The Biden administration this week began to cut the distribution of monoclonal antibodies to red states, such as Florida and Alabama, contending those states, including Texas, Mississippi, Tennessee, Georgia, and Louisiana, are comprising too big a share of the supply in recent weeks, 70%. HHS will determine the amount of product each state and territory receives on a weekly basis, a spokesman for the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services said. Equitable distribution, both geographically and temporally across the country, providing states and territories with consistent, fairly distributed supply over the coming weeks. This is what they are promising. And before I move to Alberta, a place I'm fond of. I lived 5 years there back in the 90s. Let's go back to the chat. William Hicks says, okay, we heard that already from William Hicks. Ashley Main Bravo, hello, says, what do you think about the press attacking Nicki Minaj for countersigning the Kovacs? Well, you remember when that WAP song came out, that disgusting song, they praised her to the skies because, well, she's disgusting. She's continually disgusting, and the media loves that. But now, oh, she's just so independent. She doesn't follow the rules. Yay! She doesn't follow the rules regarding about whether you have to be vaccinated or not. No, you're not allowed to not follow the rules. But didn't you praise her for being a rebel? You know, for making her own path? Well, come on. I mean, there's a limit. There's a limit to this. Oh, okay. Let's see. Ashimine Bravo again. Matt Parrott had a discussion with Deep Left Jokel, aka Kenneth Brown today on China as leftist or rightist. Yeah, Mylene is a Filipino name, says Texas Feral Hog. God is judging the husband. He was right, says Contiki Roulette. Oh, Ashi Main Bravo says Kenneth Brown said that China is ultimately plugged into the global capitalist system and thus cannot fundamentally challenge global capital. Is Nicki Minaj unironically based now? I suppose that, you know, the Chrissy Teigen. Yeah, that's who I was talking about. I can't imagine why I can't remember her name. I mean, there's obviously a competition amongst celebrity women to be the thirstiest of them all, but no one is ever going to be thirstier than Chrissy Teigen. You know, she could disappear for 6 months. It's not like she has a job or anything. She could just appear for 6 months and then, you know, come back. Perhaps a soft reboot. You know, not make a big fuss about it. Oh, why were you gone for 6 months? Oh, I thought it was time that I took a break, you know, to reflect that celebrity isn't everything. Sorry. Everything. You know, I don't need to be advertising myself every single day and telling people every single detail of my life or showing pictures of my dead, stillborn baby, putting that on Instagram. Yeah. But no, I don't think so. Brandon Smith says she's aged out of relevance. I am reminded of something that Henry Mencken once said, that a misogynist is a man who hates women as much as women hate themselves. And you see, you know, if you read about Chrissy Teigen and these feuds that she's had with other women, it's just like from 0 to 60 over nothing. Why do you hate this other woman so much? What did she ever do to you? Nothing. Apparently her mere existence enrages you. Okay. Hence the saying, says Red Sulfur, some men are different, all women are the same. I'm going to be talking about adaptation, cultural relativism tomorrow on the book club, Six Societies. And there's some anthropologists who argue about the enormous number of difference, you know, between people around the world, or you could see you know, men and women as such a binary difference as to, you know, be barely the same species. Richard Spencer. I don't follow Richard Spencer. I mean, I really don't. No Sleep Till Breezewood. PA says the Steve Saylor solution, more immigration, but for medicine. Ashimane Bravo says Dr. Robert Malone, one of the main contributors of the mRNA vaccine invention, went on Jimmy Dore and said people shouldn't. Quachalango says he's the sexiest man alive, I heard. Yes, that would be Dr. Fauci. William Hicks says obesity has exploded since the first lockdown. Saw an article on the subject a couple of days ago that should compound the COVID death count over the next few months. Trouble on top of trouble. Well, I have to say that I have gained weight since the COVID panic began. And I suppose one of the reasons is that I can't make proper meals anymore because I have to use a microwave, or I can go out to Burger King or wherever. And I suppose this is the case with a lot of people that let's just shove something in the microwave, or let's just call for something to be delivered. No Sleep Till Breezewood PA says Colbert's writers are joyless, and the moment Steve went from a character to a late night host is the moment comedy imploded. Ashiman Bravo says NASA announced a few weeks ago it's abandoning its 2024 Artemis moon mission. What does NASA do? What does NASA do? Metal Mike makes a suggestion about Jason Kenney that I won't repeat. He's still saving himself for the right woman. Oh, Don Lemon. Yeah, I guess, he's a double, right? He's black and homosexual, so that's why he is on TV. I can't think of any other reasons. Texas Feral Hog says Australia is trying to shut down the eye drug using nonsensical reasoning. They are leading edge evil. No surprise Biden wants to send them submarines. NASA sends toys up into planets for science or something, says Oscar Toe. I guess they plan on doing this for 50 more years. William Hicks says, Kevin, have you ever taken in any chuck wagon races in Calgary? First time I ever saw that on TV, I thought that's to sit and watch while drinking a case of beer, and it just gets better and better. No, I've never seen one in person. I spent all my time in Calgary, in Edmonton, and I've spent something like 3 days of my life in Calgary. People are always trying to get me to go to Calgary. Finally, I said, what is it, Paris on the Bow River? I mean, Calgary and Edmonton are really, if you looked up sprawl in an illustrated dictionary, you'd find pictures of Edmonton or Calgary. I mean, the city limits of Edmonton are so large. I mean, it's probably as big as Luxembourg or something. I remember being taken somewhere in Edmonton, in North Edmonton, and driving and thinking, shouldn't we be in the Northwest Territories by now? Quachalango, did you ever buy hungry hippos for your kid? No. Well, I don't think so. I know about the game. I know it makes an enormous amount of noise. Visionary Companion says Daniels was on Jimmy Kimmel. This would be the actor Jeff Daniels, giving us a scolding for not getting the message the first 500 times around. Jeff Daniels thinks that white people are a minority in the United States. Well, another reason why people are gaining weight or gain so much weight is because a lot of people are drinking a lot more. And of course, that leads to getting fatter. Chokin666 says, do you guys know there was a coup d'etat in Australia in 1975 fostered by the CIA? I have read that claim. There was a dispute over who was going to be a premier, and it was adjudicated by the Governor General, which is something which has happened in Canada as well. It happened in 1926 in Canada. Let's get back to it here. Let's talk about my former province of Edmonton. And Jason Kenney has just thrown in the towel. He bids fair to be the Boris Johnson of Canada. I believe in freedom. Yes, I very much believe in freedom, except when I don't. And right now I don't, but now I kind of do again. So we're on the freedom track. No, no, we're not. We have some bad numbers for a couple of weeks, so I'm just going to reverse myself totally. This is from CBC. Alberta to launch proof of vaccination program, declares health emergency amid surge in COVID-19 cases. Kenney apologized. To prevent an ongoing crisis, we must do three things urgently. First, we must maximize our healthcare capability. Secondly, reduce transmission of the virus by reducing interaction with other people. And thirdly, we have to get as many people as possible vaccinated. I believe that over 70% of the population of Alberta is fully vaccinated. And again, people are not very good with causation anymore. The new measures include restrictions on restaurants, indoor gatherings, weddings and funerals, retail, entertainment venues, and indoor sport and fitness. Oh, and everybody has to work at home unless it is absolutely necessary that they be on the job. Let's see. Working from home will be mandatory unless an employer determines a physical presence is required. Indoor private gatherings for fully vaccinated individuals are limited to a single household plus one other household to a maximum of 10 people. There are no restrictions on children under the age of 12. Eligible people who are unvaccinated are not permitted to attend any indoor private social gathering. Outdoor private social gatherings are limited to a maximum of 200 people with 2-meter distancing maintained at all times. Places of worship must limit attendance to 1/3 of fire code capacity. Face masks will be mandatory and physical distancing will be required between households. No attendance restrictions on outdoor events and facilities, but 2-meter physical distancing must be in place. Schools will be required to have mandatory masking for students in grade 4 and up, plus staff and teachers in all grades. Exemptions will be available for schools with alternate safety plans. Indoor children's sport and recreation activities are permitted with requirements for physical distancing and masking where possible. Restaurants will be limited to outdoor dining only with a maximum of 6 people per table. Liquor sales will continue to end at 10 p.m. Consumption will stop at 11 p.m. Indoor weddings and funerals will be limited to 50 attendees or 50% fire code capacity. No indoor receptions will be permitted. Attendance at retail, entertainment, and recreation facilities will be limited to 1/3 fire code capacity. People will only be permitted to attend with their household or 2 close contacts for those living alone. No indoor sport, fitness, or recreation activities for adults will be permitted. Pretty confusing. There's another CBC story that it was called A Reality Check on Alberta's Path to the Devastating Fourth Wave of COVID. And someone gave an honest answer, which I was pleased to see. The question of modeling came up. Modeling released by the province outlining the reasoning behind the Canada Day reopening and later moves to eliminate testing, contact tracing, and mandatory isolation suggests it was relying on data from the UK while ignoring conflicting data from south of the border. Speaking to CBC News last week, Dean Carlin, a physics professor and expert in modeling at the University of Victoria, who is a member of the BC's independent COVID-19 modeling group, said you don't just choose one jurisdiction. So were the decisions made on faulty modeling? According to Dr. Lenora Saxinger, an infectious disease expert at the University of Alberta in Edmonton, all modeling is wrong. There is a complex set of variables that go into the modeling projection, and a lot of what comes out the other end is based on what's fed into it. And this, of course, is what William Briggs has been shouting to the skies for months. Garbage in, garbage out, as we used to say. My old friend and colleague, Lauren Gunter at the Edmonton Sun, says that Kenney's new COVID-19 plan is a shambles. The balance is not intuitive. The approach is inconsistent. Most people will find it impossible to figure out what is and isn't allowed under the reimposed restrictions, and that complexity and arbitrariness will make public compliance spotty. And Kenney would appear to be in political trouble among his own party. But there were some interesting letters to the Edmonton Sun. This one from John Allen. What happened to you, Lauren Gunter? You were once one of the most respected columnists at the Edmonton Sun. Even after the Sun had accepted handouts from Trudeau to report his idea of responsible journalism, I still bought the paper mostly for your column, but your column Tuesday, joining the compromised Sun and blaming all the so-called COVID-19 cases on the unvaxxed, has done it for me. To start with this, COVID-19 deception has been full of lies and misinformation from the start, and not once have you or your paper done any investigative journalism into it. To start with, these big pharma injections are not a vaccination, but a DNA-changing substance that no one knows just how toxic they may be. I could go on and on about the lies big pharma has the media spinning to promote the sales of these questionable jabs, but by falsely whipping up the anger and hate of the non-critical thinkers into a murderous fury, you are putting my life and the lives of others at the very risk of being violently attacked and killed. I just never thought you would have caved to the New World Order cult. The Sun responded, Gunter argued in his column that it's within your right to refuse the vaccine, but don't expect the rest of society to integrate your decision. What do you mean, integrate your decision? What does that mean? Again, another letter from Dwayne Westad says the consequences Gunter proposes are nothing more than government-imposed restrictions on personal freedoms in order to gain compliance. To bar someone from earning a living, traveling freely, or from the freedoms you would afford any other citizen is a coercive attack on the fundamental principle of informed consent. We need to carefully consider the precedent we are setting. And the Sun responded, why should the rest of society suffer because a select few refuse a vaccine? Well, yes, there's no right-wing media in Canada, no mainstream right-wing media in Canada. Opinion writers, they know what they can get away with. And for any opinion writer, and Lauren Gunter has been doing this, since 1995, their careers would be in severe jeopardy. I'll go further than that. They'd be finished, out, fired, unhirable if they were to take an anti-mask or anti-coercive vaccine mandate position. There is really no dissent allowed in my country. That is to say, in what they call mainstream media. And here's something new from Alex Berenson at his Substack. Just how badly did vaccine failure surprise Fauci? This badly. On May 20th, he said the U.S. might be able to eliminate SARS-CoV-2 entirely. 3 months later, he was begging for boosters double quick. True story. Let's go to the videotape. On May the 20th, Dr. Anthony S. Fauci, people's sexiest man alive for 12 straight years, took time from his busy day for an interview with the Washington Post. Beyond its cringe-inducing title, Coronavirus Leadership During Crisis, the interview is noteworthy because it came at the moment of peak overconfidence in the mRNA vaccines. SARS-CoV-2 had basically disappeared in Israel, which was the first country to begin a mass mRNA vaccination campaign. With about 80% of adults vaccinated, new cases were down 99.5% from the January peak and still falling. Deaths had dropped nearly as much. On Twitter and off, the word miracle was getting thrown around a lot. Slate and The Atlantic had turned their attention to the vitally important question of which vaccine was the coolest. Pfizer. Pfizer was the coolest. And this is an actual headline from Slate, how Pfizer became the status vax. Yeah, that's what the media has been reduced to. Berenson continues, and the only thing standing in the way of herd immunity were the mouth-breathing Trump fans and some African Americans who remembered Tuskegee, but no one blamed them, who refused to submit to the miracle, no matter though the vaccines were that good. How good? Dr. Fauci can speak for himself. Question. Vaccinations are rising, but is there a concern about a resurgence in the latter part of the year as the weather gets colder? And how much of this hinges upon what our understanding is of how long these vaccines are effective? Fauci replied. Well, I don't think we should be that concerned right now about how long they're effective. I think they will be effective long enough that we will get to the point where we are not going to be necessarily worrying about a surge. As highly effective as these vaccines are, and you get a substantial proportion of the population vaccinated, the chances of there being a surge are extraordinarily low. But what about boosters, Dr. F? Boosters? We don't need no stinking boosters, Fauci was asked. One thing that you've talked about is that people might need a booster shot within a year or so of being vaccinated. What is the timeline right now for when people might need to start getting that? Fauci replied, I don't really think it's accurate to say that we will need boosters X number of months from now. We may not need it for quite a while. Will this be a situation where over the years we may need intermittent boosts? Again, you want to be prepared for that, Yasmin, but you don't know definitely if we'll need it. When you have an infectious disease and you want to, in essence, address it appropriately, there are three possibilities. One, you could eradicate it. That's a very high bar because we've only eradicated one human infectious disease in our entire history, and that is smallpox. The next thing you can do is eliminate, and you generally do that by having certain countries, usually with good vaccination programs, essentially eliminate the presence of a particular pathogen in our society. We've done that with polio in the United States. We've done that with measles in the United States and other developed nations. So that's called elimination, Fauci continued, and the other is control. You have a very, very low level in the community, not enough to be a public health issue, but enough to know that you haven't completely eliminated it. We don't know where we're going to be with SARS-CoV-2 and with COVID-19. I would hope it would be much closer to elimination than just control. That's going to depend entirely on the success, which I believe we're going in the right direction, of the vaccine program. Berenson concludes, elimination, control. At this point, I think we'd settle for zero efficacy, zero long-term side effects. Of course, the vaccine fanatics, including the ones in the White House, will note that the United States didn't duplicate Israel's success at vaccinating nearly its entire adult population. Lucky us. I'm a terrible Jew today, Berenson says. I shouldn't be working, and I usually do observe Yom Kippur seriously, but under the circumstances, I do hope whoever is in charge gives me a pass. Also, my temple won't let me go to services in person since I'm not vaccinated because science. Anyway, the Haftarah from Isaiah is what really matters. Hope you're having an easy fast. Well, the skeptics have been proved to be correct. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. As Berenson said yesterday, as the saying goes, the beatings will continue until morale improves. Efficiency. We all love efficiency, right? That's why ICUs are being overrun, as they say, because it was decided there would be no surplus capacity. Because you don't want surplus capacity. I mean, what's the worst thing that could happen? This is from Brendan Murray at Bloomberg Business Week. Just get me a box inside the brutal realities of supply chain hell. Logistics managers are battling the pandemic, a labor shortage, and huge demand to get goods to your front door. It's mid-August, and logistics manager Roxanne Thomas's phone won't stop pinging. Her faucets, sinks, and toilets are waylaid near Shanghai, snagged in Vancouver, and buried under a pile of shipping containers in a rail yard outside Chicago. As U.S. transportation manager for Gerber Plumbing Fixtures, LLC, a unit of Taiwan's Globe Union Industrial Corp that's based in Woodridge, Illinois, Thomas is trying to overcome the biggest shockwave to unsettle the global trade since the dawn of container shipping almost 7 decades ago. Yes, the miracle of just-in-time delivery. Again, what could possibly go wrong with that? Trump predicts America coming to an end. Well, that's one way to interpret what he said. Our country has really gone downhill in the last 8 months like nobody's ever seen before, he said on Sean Spicer's Newsmax show. And we're not going to have a country left in 3 years, I'll tell you that. I don't think he means that America is going to physically disappear. Camp of the Saints, as VDR calls it, and they're absolutely right. Exclusive photos, 8,000 migrants detained under border bridge in Texas. And of course, these people do not have to be tested for COVID-19 because they're better than Americans. This is from John Binder at Breitbart. President Joe Biden is looking to team up with former Presidents Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, and Barack Obama, as well as multinational corporations. And don't you just love them? Because they have your best wishes at heart. They do. They always have. To bring Afghans to the United States for permanent resettlement. This week, former officials with the Clinton, Bush, and Obama administrations launched the organization Welcome.us, which will work with multinational corporations such as Airbnb, Walmart, Starbucks, Instacart, Facebook, Microsoft, and Chobani to provide financial support to Afghans arriving in the U.S. as part of Biden's massive resettlement operation. Biden said he hopes to settle about 95,000 Afghans across the U.S. over the next 12 months. In the 12-day period from August to September, Biden brought more than 48,000 Afghans to the U.S. for resettlement, a population more than 4 times that of Jackson, Wyoming. It was all about interpreters. So did every soldier, American soldier in Afghanistan, have a personal interpreter? Yes. Not a dime's worth of difference between them, as George Wallace used to say. There's a piece at the American Sun. Afghan migrants, European experience, criminality statistics, American future. This is at theamericansun.com. And I highly recommend that you read it because of the shocking numbers regarding crime, particularly sexual crime committed by so-called migrants in Europe after the wave of, 2011, was it? And let's look at Sweden here. One of the worst of these crimes took place in 2016, less than an hour north of Stockholm. It came to light that a boy was beaten and gang raped at knife point by 5 Afghan teens who later posted their crimes to social media. After being arrested and put on trial, the teens were found guilty of aggravated rape, but instead of being deported, they will serve sentences between 13 and 15 months. These child rapists could not be deported because they would be hit very hard as Afghanistan is unsafe, the court said. So what the judge is saying is that the safety and security of Sweden is as nothing compared to what these poor rapists might suffer if they were sent back to Afghanistan. I don't know. It's difficult not to conclude that these 5 Afghan teens should have been drawn and quartered, but we don't do that sort of thing anymore. Viktor Orban is not a Roman Catholic. He is a Lutheran, but he's doing more than any Catholics are to preserve the West. This is from Paul Joseph Watson at Summit News. Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban asked Pope Francis not to let Christianity perish as he gave him a gift that challenged the Supreme Pontiff's advocacy of mass immigration. At the meeting on Sunday, according to state media, Orban even handed the Pope a provocative gift, a copy of a letter from a 13th century Hungarian king to then Pope Innocent IV, asking for Rome's help to defeat an onslaught of foreign invaders, an apparent reference to migrants in the 21st century, reports CBS News. Balázs Orbán, a deputy minister for the Prime Minister's office, described the historical importance of the letter on Twitter. PM Orbán met Pope Francis and presented a letter that King Bela IV wrote for Pope Innocent IV in 1250. The king warned of the looming threat of the Tartar invasion and called for the unity of Europe. He was ignored. 35 years later, Hungary fended off the Tartars with great bloodshed. However, Pope Francis is unlikely to change his mind, and this was emphasized when he told a crowd in Budapest that Hungarians should extend their arms to everyone, referring to migrants and refugees. Well, why doesn't the Vatican City open itself up? Plenty of empty space there. They can camp out in front of St. Peter's. Now, I'll leave Joseph Tainter for tomorrow. I'm going to be moving on to Theater Thursday shortly. Before I do, Someone called Laura Sklarov has a very strange take on COVID and the culture. The 70s are back in 2021, but not in the way you think. Okay, Vietnam, Afghanistan, right? Inflation, etc. If the disco era is most noted for American narcissism, this summer zeitgeist struck a familiar note with the White Lotus reveling in the self-absorption of the 1%, HBO's general roster, from the Gossip Girl reboot to The Undoing and Succession, minds wealthy New Yorkers whose indulgence drives storylines. The appeal of these 70s themes hasn't escaped show business tastemakers either. Streaming services have recently featured a Halston biopic, a documentary on the Bee Gees, and another focused solely on the music of 1971. Ryan Murphy's new American Crime Story will center on Studio 54. These productions and others like them on the docket echo today's cultural climate in critical ways. Disco itself, a dominant driver of 70s culture, was a product of the social and political upheavals of the 1960s. No, it wasn't, but never mind. By the early 1970s, years of racial conflict, economic failure, Watergate, and an admission to failure in Vietnam cast more than doubt on the age of Aquarius aspirations. Disco was the manifestation of failed utopian ideologies, but also a new form of political expression for marginalized groups. It is perhaps this energy we are reviving with all this cultural production, touting and echoing the cultural touchstones of the 1970s. No. People are afraid to leave their houses. Discos, you can't go to discos. You got to maintain that 6 feet distance. Wear a mask. Be double vaccinated. This woman has got the wrong end of the stick. That's the only way. After the Stonewall Uprising in 1969, disco really took off. No. Why don't you go on Wikipedia, or allmusic.com? 1969? Sorry, no. After the long history of anti-gay legislation, sexual repression, Stonewall emboldened gay liberation as well as the chant out of the closets into the streets. You see, the old switcheroo here. People complained about disco at the time. This is gay music, or they said ruder things than that. No, it's not. No, it isn't. And now we've heard for the last 20 years, yes, it was. Yes, it was gay music. And you suckers thought that it was fun. Joke's on you. Oh, yes, talk about Fire Island and lofts and how about AIDS? Does AIDS get mentioned here? Marvin Gaye is mentioned, his song, What's Going On? And Stevie Wonder's Living for the City. These are not disco songs, and I don't know what they have to do with this thesis. I think I'm going to talk on coming up on Music Monday about disco demolition night in Chicago at Comiskey Stadium. This was the last time that the white working class in the United States was allowed to have any say about culture. And we're back to these glorious days of discos and poppers and AIDS. Yeah, remember AIDS? Oh, yeah, that was a lot of fun, right? And of course, the word AIDS does not appear in this silly woman's story. That's where hedonism leads. Mary Harrington writes in Unheard how Satanism conquered America. Proverbially, the devil has all the best tunes. Does he have the best books too? Apparently so, at least where soft porn is concerned. Last week, it was reported that Xavier Nobel, a prominent Catholic exorcist and bishop, has resigned from the church in order to be with his lover, a writer of erotic, satanic fiction. I looked this story up, and I was shocked to find out that Bishop Nobel's lover is actually a woman. Crazy, right? The whole story evoked The Exorcist, which came out a few years before I was born and was considered the ne plus ultra of shocking content into my tween years in the 90s. But even setting aside the fact that the other side seems to have won, Nobel's stories evoked a little less shock than nostalgia. In 2021, even the idea of a priest as the main protagonist in the battle between good and evil feels, well, very 1973. These days, while there's plenty of Satanist imagery about, Overtly anti-Christian symbols seem either banal, Lil Nas selling Satan trainers, or just naff, witch talk. But if devilish imagery feels mostly a bit cringe, the devil himself has gone mainstream. If being deliberately anti-Christian pour épater la bourgeoisie feels exhausted, for the new post-Christian bourgeoisie, Satan now reads like the good guy. And in the hands of this class, the devil's proverbial pride, self-regard, and refusal to yield isn't just celebrated. It's on its way to becoming the established religion of the United States of America. And then the author notes what was previously noted in this space, Salon magazine celebrating the Satanic Temple for its championship of abortion. How did we get to a point where an online magazine with 10 million monthly readers is hailing Satanists as last-ditch heroes? The truth is that our modern sympathy for the devil has deep roots, and Americans in particular are highly susceptible. Perhaps Milton is to blame. Cromwell's chief propagandist is famous for creating the most sympathetic Satan in literary history. In Milton's 1963 biblical epic Paradise Lost, Satan both longs for the heaven he's renounced, but stubbornly refuses to be ruled, declaring better to reign in hell than serve in heaven. This matters because Milton wrestled with core questions of law, authority, and personal freedom that roiled at the heart of the Protestant Reformation. And the Reformation was foundational to the modern West, and especially to America, and tracing the history of that rebellion brings us today to the startling conclusion that post-Christian America is an increasingly Satanist regime. Paradise Lost was written against a backdrop of religious ferment following Martin Luther's 1517 rejection of the constraining legalistic force of Catholic law. Civil War England was a chaos of competing sects. For in seeking to free Christians from a church reformers claimed was rigid and corrupt, the Protestants opened themselves up to the possibility that all laws, rules, and constraints might be replaced by faith. A great deal of early Protestant turmoil was driven by people arguing over what, if any, limits there should be to the rebellion against doctrine. Some took it to extremes. One of Luther's colleagues, Johann Agricola, preached in 1525 that even the Ten Commandments belong in the courthouse, not the pulpit. To the gallows with Moses, he declared. Luther was having none of it, dubbing this antinomianism. Lawrence Clarkson, an antinomian contemporary of Milton, even wrote in one 1640 pamphlet that sin is fake news. Sin hath its conception only in the imagination, therefore. So long as the act was in God or nakedly produced by God, it was as holy as God. As they say today, believe in yourself and you can do anything. And I would add that they're probably still doing it, for a couple of generations, so-called conservatives have preached that the highest virtue is, not truth or goodness, virtue, community, anything like that. No, it is choice. And this is what our author is writing about, choice. The veneration of choice is essentially satanic. Though Milton painted such extreme rejections of authorities and rules as literally satanic, the appealingly anti-hero nature of his Satan suggests he had mixed feelings. There were others, though. The engraver and poet William Blake declared in his 1970 The Marriage of Heaven and Hell that no virtue can exist without breaking these 10 commandments. Jesus was all virtue and acted from impulse, not rules. Meanwhile, and then she moves on to Aleister Crowley, 1875 to 1947, who pursued a doctrine of individual will unconstrained by law or stuffy morality. He called himself the Beast 666, experimented with sex and drugs, and in 1923 was expelled from Sicily after an associate died in mysterious circumstances, reportedly after drinking the blood of a sacrificed cat. We tend to think of such deliberately shocking behavior as the essence of Satanism, but Crowley's core legacy was stripping the last remnants of Christianity from antinomian rebellion. His most famous dictum, written in the Book of the Law, 1909, was, "Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law." And that's pretty much what this veneration of choice comes down to. Remember the universal injunction, love is love? Yes. As we see pedophilia being mainstream, we learn that, they're not talking about pride or anything like that. They're not talking about the civil rights of homosexuals. They mean it. Love is love, and there is to be no constraint placed upon men in this regard. In 1882, Friedrich Nietzsche declared God dead and the human will to power is the only real source of good. In America, meanwhile, the individualist celebration of mankind became ever less Christian. Though she disavowed him later, the American writer Ayn Rand, 1905 to 1982, called Nietzsche her favorite philosophy in the 1930s. Rand's doctrine, objectivism, argues selfishness is both noble and good. Quote, it's the hardest thing in the world to do what we want. Unquote. Is it? Really? Argues one character in Rand's 1943 The Fountainhead, and it takes the greatest kind of courage. Both Crowley and Rand pursued the liberation of individual will from taboo, custom, law, and even, as practitioners of ceremonial magic, hoped reality itself. These influences fused again in 1966 California with Anton LaVey's Church of Satan. LaVey drew on both Rand and Crowley to reject all collectivist constraints on individual behavior and emphasize the primacy of individual desire. There is a beast in man, he declared, that should be exercised, not exorcised. LaVey, a former carnival worker, took a highly theatrical approach to exercising that beast, incorporating dark ceremonies and all the props you'd expect to find in horror movie depiction of Satanism, or indeed in quite a lot of heavy metal. But if he was still rebelling against Christianity, the core Satanist philosophy of radical godless freedom took less provocative form elsewhere in 1966 California in, for example, the self-actualization promoted by Abraham Maslow at the Esalen Institute. So it shouldn't come as a surprise that individual autonomy and self-empowerment is the central aim of the Satanic Temple's abortion ritual, the ceremonial affirmation of self-worth and bodily autonomy, at the heart of the group's current Texas court case. But that doesn't mean you need to become a devout Satanist to embrace the belief that self-empowerment is our real purpose in life and that guilt is an unwarranted intrusion. Aleister Crowley wrote in the Book of the Law that every man and woman is a star. And from Rand to Maslow to a trillion empowering Pinterest memes today, a variant of this dictum is a core message of the self-help industry. Self-help writer Julia Cameron, for example, closely echoes Ayn Rand in her 1992 bestseller, The Artist's Way, when she declares, what we really want to do is what we are really meant to do. Elsewhere, if you want a bit more ritual with your individualism, but the heavy metal Church of Satan vibe isn't your thing, there's the occultism meets Pamper Day aesthetic of Erin Murphy Hiscock's 2019 The Witch's Guide to Self-Care. Echoing Crowley, Murphy Hiscock tells us living as your authentic self means following a very individual path. If, for example, you find yourself plagued by inconvenient feelings of guilt as a consequence of doing exactly what you want, Murphy Hiscock suggests a ritual for releasing those feelings. No wonder the modern satanic temple is now, as The Guardian suggested in 2019, hard to distinguish from the liberal good guys. At its core, Satanism is simply the doctrine of untrammeled individualism, shorn of any link to the divine. To put it another way, Satanists are just very, very liberal. Sacralized self-worship now has an annual religious festival. This new, increasingly pseudo-religious summer event, simply known as Pride Month, may have started out as a 20th century campaign for gay and lesbian equality. What began as a justified and at root deeply Christian campaign for equal treatment for gay and lesbian people has long since morphed into a corporate-sponsored celebration of individualism that today horrifies many gay and lesbian people. At least on the now majority post-Christian East and West coasts of America, the sacralization of individual freedom and desire is increasingly assertive in its efforts to expunge Christianity as America's official faith. A less overt challenge than those posed by Aleister Crowley or Anton LaVey, but a continuation of the same argument. This time, though, the boot is on the other foot. The side with the imperial, institutional, and military backing is the faith of self-expression, individual will, and indomitable pride. And that is from Mary Harrington at Unheard, which is unherd.com. Before I move to Theater Thursday, let's take another look at the chat. Visionary Companion says Genesis P. Orridge is the logical result of acte gratuite hipsterism. As Main Bravo says, Jumpin' Jim Crow equals Lil Nell S. True Greenberg says, I think the ritual for getting rid of guilt rather than atoning is commonly referred to as therapy. De Berea says deprivation and syphilis go hand in hand. William Hicks says, if memory serves, a key element of Rand's philosophy is reason and rationality. Mysticism, which includes the occult, is reviled by objectivism. In The Fountainhead, Rand opines, and of course, her novels are simply expression of her, political thinking, that women yearn to be ravished by men, taken by force, if necessary, which does not sound like a particularly rational view to me. Joel Gerke says, whatever statements by Fauci about future need for boosters in 2020 should be presumed to have been motivated by a desire to inspire confidence in the efficacy of the vaccines he was promoting then. Yes, as he likes to say, the science changed. Lil Nas X is just a minstrel character, says Ashimane Bravo, as so many of these rappers are. Ashimane Bravo, when EMJ went on Jared Taylor's refusal to address the JQ, EMJ basically just eviscerated Taylor, in my opinion. I don't think so. I haven't seen Taylor's response to, I thought what was Jones's deeply misguided essay. Okay, I'll try to find that again. Actually, Orban is Calvinist, says William Stewart. Thank you for the correction. Okay, let's go to Theater Thursday, and I am talking about a movie from 1997, which is called Starship Troopers. Now, I suppose some people are going to complain that of the dissimilarities between Verhoeven's movie and Robert Heinlein's 1959 novel. Well, the truth is, what do we have? We've got war. We've got war as a precondition for citizenship or service in the military. We have a fascist society. That's about all the similarities. Verhoeven didn't read the book. He read a little, thought it was terrible. The screenwriter, Ed Neumeyer, knew the book, but Verhoeven wanted to make a different kind of movie, which he did, which is it's quite an ambiguous movie. Ambiguous in many ways. Idiot. Movie reviewers in the United States thought that Starship Troopers was a celebration of fascism. Yes, that word was used. I responded, Starship Troopers was the riposte to America's forever wars before America knew of forever wars. The funniest thing about the critical reaction to Starship Troopers was a total lack of understanding of ambiguity. That ilk is always on about nuance, but when presented with it artistically, they shrieked in terror. Let's see. Yes, interesting reply here that I got from what I wrote about Starship Troopers on Twitter was that, someone, 2018's Most Trusted Web Zone said, like all good parodies, it satirized the genre while also being a functional entry in that genre. It's great. Well, that's a very good point about parody. Parody can't come from a place of, hatred or disgust. There must be some sort of attraction to that which is being parodied. Okay, so we see that the troops, the Federation troops in Starship Trooper, they have gray uniforms, and they've got eagle devices, and they've got field caps. They look like the German, they look like the Wehrmacht in World War II, and that is very deliberate because Paul Verhoeven lived through the German occupation of the Netherlands, where he is from. But again, when Doogie Howser shows up in a Joseph Goebbels greatcoat, even an idiot should have realized that Starship Troopers is a savage satire of militarism. David Pinson replied, it works both as a straight war movie and a satire of one, and it does. I understand the satire, and I agree with the satire. But then, when I see our soldiers here who we've come to know, and they die in large numbers, and the particular soldier that we've come fond of gets killed by a bug, I feel the same as Johnny Rico. Kill all bugs. All bugs must die. Exactly. A Fox made an excellent comment. Exactly. That's what makes it such a great movie. You can laugh at the satire. At the same time, you thrill to the sheer awesomeness of this glorious fascist armada battling giant roaches in space. Yes, that's what this movie is about. A glorious fascist armada battling giant roaches in space. Paul Verhoeven has had 3 careers. Let's learn something about Verhoeven. He was born in 1938 in Amsterdam. He later lived in The Hague. And Paul Verhoeven is a very smart man, a master of science with a double major in mathematics and physics from Leiden University. And I believe he was looking to get a doctorate, but then he decided to turn to filmmaking. He made student films. He made a bunch of what you might call art films, quirky, perverse art films in Holland, which were successful. They were successful. Business is Business, Turkish Delight, Kitty Tipple, which is, it's a historical drama. And A Soldier of Orange, which is the most popular film in Dutch history, which is about the resistance to the Germans during World War II. I mean, this obviously had a great effect on the young Verhoeven, as well it might. Spetters, a very strange film, indeed. And All Things Pass. And The Fourth Man. The Fourth Man, I don't know. It's a fascinating film, but it's troublesome. Its depiction of religion is quite troublesome, particularly of the Catholic faith. Verhoeven was raised as a Catholic, and I believe he still regards himself as one, although he belongs to this thing called the Jesus Project, which is a continuation of the mid-19th century attempt to basically suck all the supernatural out of Christianity. I see that Paul Bartel, an actor and filmmaker, described The Fourth Man as the first gay Catholic horror film. Verhoeven is not a homosexual himself. He made a transitional film in 1985 called Flesh and Blood, which is about war, about medieval Italy. And it had stars in it, Rutger Hauer and Jennifer Jason Leigh. So any European filmmaker who's successful, they're typically invited to move to America, and RoboCop did. And he started making films which were very different than the films that he had made in the Netherlands. RoboCop in 1987, which I have reviewed previously on Theater Thursday. It is one of my very favorite films. And then A Total Recall with Arnold Schwarzenegger in 1990, it's hilarious, absolutely hilarious. Basic Instinct in 1992. It's good, it's audacious, it's thrilling, but the script is by Joe Eszterhas, and Joe Eszterhas is not a good script writer. I suppose Verhoeven's career was derailed somewhat when his 1990 film Showgirls came out. Again, written by Joe Eszterhas. It doesn't really have stars in it. Elizabeth Berkley from that teen show, Saved by the Bell, Kyle MacLachlan, Twin Peaks, and Gina Gershon. It is considered by many people to be one of the worst films ever made, to be one of the most laughable films ever made. But of course, it is now considered to be a cult classic. Starship Troopers came out in 1997, 2 years after Showgirls, and it was not a particular hit, and it was completely, unappreciated, misunderstood by the critics. His last film in America in 2000 was called Hollow Man. It's the Invisible Man story, only made realistic, and it's got Kevin Bacon, Elizabeth Shue, and Josh Brolin. Also, Kim Dickens, adorable-looking woman, an actress, very fond of her. Technically, it is really impressive. The special effects are absolutely outstanding. The script, not so much. So he didn't make a film for 6 years, and then he made a film called Zwart Boek, or Black Book, which I like a great deal, although this is a movie which is going to offend a lot of people. It's about a Jewish woman during World War II on the run from the Nazis, who joins the resistance and uses her feminine wiles. I suppose what is controversial about this film is the conclusion is that love is more important than politics. Film Elle, 2016. I'm not going to recommend this film. It is one of the most shocking things that I have ever seen. It stars Isabelle Huppert. And the thesis of the film is that being raped gives women power. I am not making this up. That the rape victim, if you will, gains, control in some way. It's just, as I say, it's completely nuts. And he has a new film called Benedetta, which is about supposed true story of a lesbian nun in the 17th century. And I'm not going to see that film. But back to Starship Troopers. I mentioned that it was written by Ed Neumeyer, who wrote RoboCop. And Neumeyer has a terrific sense of humor, which is displayed in this film. Neumeyer has a bit part in the film. He's the fellow who is condemned to death, and his execution is going to be broadcast at 6 p.m. on all channels that evening. And the producer, John Davison, who also produced RoboCop, has a bit part in the film as well as the angry man who shouts, "The only good bug is a dead bug." So, levels of satire in this film. How about sexually? It's hilarious to me, although I don't know whether people get the joke anymore, that women are shown to be equal in all respects to men. For instance, at punching people out or quarterbacking a football team. And we have a co-ed shower for the soldiers in which everyone's naked. And of course, that's not going to lead to any difficulties, because why would it? It's absolutely hilarious that in the beginning of the film, we have a high school graduating class. And you see the style, for instance, the cinematography, which is by Jost Ficano, the great German DP. That it's like something like Melrose Place or whatever that show was called. Any Saved by the Bell, for that matter. The flat lighting of it. We have a scene, a dance, a graduation dance, which is being held in a quad outside, and it's outside at night. But everything is brightly lighted, such that there are no gaps there. It's absolutely ridiculous. But this was clearly chosen deliberately in order to highlight the unreality of the story. Now, I read that some minority activist was very upset about the casting of Casper Van Dien as Johnny Rico. Now, the film begins in Buenos Aires. It's not like any Buenos Aires that anyone would recognize, because Buenos Aires, or the inhabitants of Buenos Aires, appear to be Americans. Everyone's speaking English. There's not, in fact, the racial makeup. I don't know. It'd be like a city like Portland at the time, actually. And so in Heinlein's novel, Johnny Rico is Filipino or half Filipino. Casper Van Dien is ridiculously handsome, and he looks like he stepped up, off a Nazi propaganda poster, and that's why he was chosen to play the lead. Denise Richards, she plays a kick-ass babe, many kick-ass babes in this film. This movie in 1997. It was made before, I suppose, the idea of kick-ass babe had been internalized, that people believe that this actually exists. And of course, it doesn't. And Denise Richards, she plays Carmen Ibanez. We got a lot of Spanish names here, but these people do not look Spanish. The population of Argentina is overwhelmingly, first Spanish and then Italian. But they don't look like that. Denise Richards looks like Denise Richards. And she's supposed to be a math ace. And of course, she's going to become a kick-ass pilot. The best of the best. Despite the fact that despite her bovine looks, she has tremendous teeth, the whitest teeth I've ever seen. And Brenda Strong, she was in Desperate Housewives, and I watched that show. Of course, she was also the braless wonder on Seinfeld. Plays her commanding officer in the film, and Brenda Strong, her face radiates intelligence, whereas Denise Richards' face radiates dim-wittedness. But that's part of the joke. Johnny Rico's parents would seem to be fabulously wealthy, and they live in a home which seems to be, I don't know, the ceiling seems to be like 60 feet high, and it's all made of glass. And I'm thinking, wow, I wouldn't want to pay those heating bills. What his parents do for a living? Unclear, not important. They're just rich, and they want to send Johnny Rico to Harvard. Johnny Rico is not a particularly good student, although he likes history, or at least the history taught by John Rashak, played by the inimitable Michael Ironside, who teaches that force has solved more problems than anything else in human history, which is obviously true, but solved for the better. That's not a question that the teacher actually gets into. We have the friends forever at this high school in Buenos Aires, and we have Neil Patrick Harris, who's the brainy one. Well, another one of the brainy ones. He plays Carl, and it's good casting, really. There, he's supposed to be some sort of romantic rival. Dina Meyer, who is very, very cute, rather moving in this film, plays Dizzy Flores. She really has it in for Johnny Rico. She wants Johnny, but Johnny only has eyes for Carmen. And so Neil Patrick Harris attempts to move in on Dina Meyer, and Neil Patrick Harris, his persona radiates asexuality. And he was cast in that horrible show, How I Met Your Mother, and he's supposed to be, the notches on the bedpost guy. No, not that guy. Not that guy. We have Patrick Boldune as Xander Barcelo, another romantic rival for Carmen's hand. Dizzy is fierce and loyal, and Carmen is a flighty and a bit of a tart, I must say. Apparently, audiences had a problem with this, because the audience is rooting for Dizzy, as they should. She's a brave woman. Lots of other good people in the cast. So you've got Jake Busey in it, and Clancy Brown, who is always good. Hey, we have a Golden Girl. Rue McClanahan is a biology teacher. Marshall Bell plays the most cowardly, terrified general in movie history. And we've got Dean Norris, who you'll remember from Breaking Bad as the brother-in-law, and a young, beautiful Amy Smart as another pilot cadet, because, the ranks of cadets in the Air Force are filled with women who look like Amy Smart and Denise Richards. At least they do in the future. There doesn't seem to be any kind of racial conflict at all in this film. None whatsoever. I mean, the world has become a fascist unity, and it's all directed out at the bugs, the arachnids. And I really have to say that I was looking at the credits last night when I was rewatching the film. There's like 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 different effects companies working on this film. But this doesn't really, it's not, oh, that's a CGI film. One of the reasons, you can't dismiss it as a CGI film is the CGI looks really good. And particularly the use of sound in conjunction with it to suggest heft. The design of the main bugs, arachnids, they're terrifying. They're just killing machines. And they emit this high-pitched, powerful, it's like a scream. And they're difficult to kill. Of course, there's a famous shot in this film, which was obviously stolen from the movie Zulu, where you see, in Zulu, the British under siege, and you see the Zulus coming at them. Oh, we can deal with this. And then we see, oh my God, there seems to be like 1 million of them. And we see an homage to that shot in this film. We find out, amusingly, although this is just sort of thrown in, that it was the Mormons decided to colonize a planet which was in the zone of the arachnids, and the Mormons ended up getting slaughtered, all of them, and so Earth decides that they're going to have to avenge the Mormons. Buenos Aires is nuked in the course of this film, with the death of 15, 20 million people. But this whole thing started because a bunch of Mormons decided to go where they were very much not wanted. Music is by Basil Poledouris, who is great. He's always great. He died in 2006. Of course, he did the music for RoboCop and The Hunt for Red October and Red Dawn, which I have discussed, Conan the Barbarian. He worked extensively, with both John Milius and with Paul Verhoeven. And there's a grandeur to his music, which is sorely lacking. Of course, Jerry Goldsmith had the grandeur too. But what we get in these enormously loud movie soundtracks now is just oppressive noise and the hand being tipped to every surprise in the film. So this is a war movie, and it's a satire, and it was really ahead of its time because of its use of an internet-like interface. We see this propaganda. Verhoeven admitted that one of the opening scenes of the movie of the serried ranks of the Federation's infantry was taken directly from Leni Riefenstahl's Triumph of the Will. And we're given various types of propaganda. A lot of it is very serious. But as in RoboCop, a lot of it is very comical, too. We see a bunch of, the Federation needs soldiers. So are you ready? Are you ready to be a soldier? Are you ready to become a citizen? And then we see the soldiers, in full battle armor with their heavy, heavy guns beating a group of school children. You remember when RoboCop met the school children? What would you say to them? And he says, "Stay out of trouble," which is absolutely hilarious because it's not really an inspiring message, is it? But no. So how would you like to handle these big guns and these kids who are like 8-year-olds? No, I want the gun. No, I want the gun. You know. Later we see a message about bugs. Of course, we have bugs on Earth, but they're generally small and they might be a nuisance, but unterrifying. And we see a bunch of kids squashing bugs because that's what you do with bugs. You squash them. Now, there's a reveal in the film that we have become accustomed to looking at these arachnids as simple killing machines. Well, it turns out they're not that simple, and they are not stupid, which leads to millions of deaths for the Federation. What, 100,000 dead in 1 hour in one battle, the one in which Johnny Rico gets torn up. So we have boy wins girl, boy loses girl, boy chases girl across the galaxy, which is pretty hilarious. And poor Dizzy is throwing herself at Johnny Rico, and he's just not interested. At the beginning of the film, Johnny Rico tells his great love, Denise Richards, he says, "I love you." You know, as Jerry Seinfeld once said, that's a pretty big matzo ball hanging out there, and she does not return it. And later in the film, we see this reversed with Johnny Rico and Diz, and one feels very, very sorry for Dizzy in this film. That, friends forever. They're going to be friends forever. And of course, it's completely implausible that these people from the high school would be brought together. But if you're looking for plausibility in this film, well, you're looking at the wrong film. You know, take a look at the shooting in the film, the shooting from their future rifles. They seem to have an unlimited supply of ammunition. You know, I was really shocked to learn that, fully automatic rifle, that how long does it take to shoot 30 rounds? 4 seconds, I believe. And they're shooting, they're not shooting fully automatic, but they seem to go through each soldier seems to go through hundreds of rounds in the space of a couple of minutes in each battle. And where are they going to store all this ammunition? Because these are big rounds, you know. So we great on location shooting, particularly in Hell's Half Acre in Wyoming, which looks completely dead. It looks like a place where nothing has ever lived and nothing could ever live. Now, I mentioned the internet. Do you want to know more? That's one of the catch lines from this film. That after we've been given the propaganda, and we see Neil Patrick Harris explaining the best way how to kill one of these arachnids, and we have, it's informational. It's news you can use, and that's one of the things that's so sinister about it. There's no anti-war movement in this movie. I mean, it's not even considered that anyone would be against this forever war, because that's what we're talking about here. Johnny Rico's parents, his father cuts him off from what would seem to be a vast inheritance because he's stupid enough to join the mobile infantry. Not because he has any objection to the forever war. He just doesn't want his son being involved in it and possibly being, mutilated and killed. It's simply selfishness there. There's a great scene in it when they all go to sign up. Denise Richards, and Johnny Rico, and Neil Patrick Harris. And there is a man seated with a table in front of him, and we see that he has a prosthetic metal arm. And so the other two, they push ahead of him, and the recruiting officer asks Johnny Rico where he's joining, and he says, mobile infantry. And he pushes away from his desk, and we see that he has no legs. So he has one limb, and he says, mobile infantry, the mobile infantry made me the man I am today. It's not a joke line. Okay, we can laugh at it, and it's rather horrifying, but the man is completely serious. He means it. And that's one of the films that makes this, that's one of the reasons why Starship Trooper is a so much better film than so many others that would seek to, satirize war in a comedic way, is because it takes war seriously. People get mangled in this film. A lot of people get mangled in this film. People get killed in this film. Characters that we've been introduced to, characters that we've come to know, get killed in this film. Verhoeven does not think that war is a joke. So again, the satire of this film, again, that this is a forever war, and people have forgotten why it began, and it doesn't matter why it began. And the flower of generation after generation is going to be sacrificed for this forever war, because the only good bug is a dead bug. There's no indication in this film that the arachnids are seeking to expand their share of the galaxy. I mean, they are hideous. And there are many different kinds of arachnids shown, and we have some surprises. There are 3 different kinds that are introduced only near the end, and it brings a lot of variety to it. And I have to say again that the design, not just the CGI stuff, but the modeling work and the matte work. This is the way that films should be made. I mean, to the extent that practical effects will look better than computer effects, you should use practical effects. And I think the Starship Troopers is perhaps the best example I can think of a movie which melds practical and computer effects. I don't think I'm going to spoil anything by saying that the movie has a happy ending. Not happy for everybody, of course, but it ends in a flourish of victory, a sort of flourish of. It's a kind of movie that the Nazis would have made in 1945 if they had won the war, and that's what makes this film horrifying as well as hilarious. I just think it's a tremendous film from every point of view. There's no point in saying that Casper Van Dien or Denise Richards, they're not good actors. You're missing the point. They are supposed to be playing people much like they are, and it works. If you had a serious actor, actors playing these roles, they would attempt to add all this actorly stuff, and they'd be looking at their character saying, I come off as a complete idiot. How can I change my character to not come off as a complete idiot? Great film, Starship Troopers. And let's go to the chat. Poisonous Spider, Black Widow. What's this? I saw Hacksaw Ridge a couple of nights ago. Not a great movie, but a great story, says True Greenbeard. Texas Feral Hog says Mormons are under attack by arachnids. Eastern Utah is crawling with black widows. It could be the whole state. My nephew and I accidentally discovered them at Canyonlands National Park. You shouldn't ever tell a girl you like her first, says Jimmy Jakes. She'll be disappointed. The movie was very true to life there. Are you doing your part? Would be a nice bumper sticker. It says True Greenbeard. So we say serried ranks every day now. Oh dear, have I done that 2 days in a row. You know what would be terrifying? What does this say? Eusocial? Arachnids? Paul Verhoeven's America was always unrecognizable and jarring to me. I liked ST because I don't have to reconcile it with reality. Well, no, again, I mean, this is a film about America, and it's a film about Americans, despite the fact that it's the people in it, or at least the people we meet at the beginning, are supposed to be from Buenos Aires. I mean, Ed Neumeyer has talked, that it has a, it has a universalist message. I suppose it does. But again, it's really about America. And again, Forever Wars before Forever Wars. Jimmy Jake says the cute blonde singing the cover of Oxford Town by David Bowie at graduation was Basil Polidoris' daughter, the guy who did the Conan Barbarian soundtrack. Yes, indeed. Acting phenom Denise Richards. Wasn't she a Bond girl? And she says nuclear weapons, as I recall. Yes, brain. Yeah, well, yes, of course, this is a terribly violent movie. And of course, unrealistic with that. Denise Richards gets speared by an arachnid, just in the back, just over the arm, just on the other side of the arm. It comes all the way through, and that is there for minutes and minutes and minutes. And then it gets pulled out. And a few minutes later, we see her walking along with her friends, whereas she'd be whimpering in agony somewhere after that. Verhoeven had a talent for making things he personally didn't like seem really cool. Flesh and Blood with the Middle Ages, RoboCop with the narco-tyranny, and fascism with Starship Troopers. Indeed, William Hicks says, I like Flesh and Blood. Jennifer Jason Leigh is great. Indeed, she is great. Visionary Companion says, I tried to watch Flesh and Blood recently. It was unrelentingly about flesh and blood. William Hicks says Rob Ager on his YouTube channel, Collative Learning, does some great analysis on the hidden depths of Starship Troopers. Steve says it is a caricature of fascism, but then there are right-wingers who see it and say, that looks good. Let's do that. Well, I suppose one of the reasons why, it's often a bad idea to get into a war with some other country or some other species, if you will, is because of the the natural attraction of patriotism. When your countrymen are being killed by foreigners, there is a natural reaction to want to kill them in turn. And yes, I mean, tyrants have done this many, many times in the past, and you could argue that they're doing it to this day, of dragging their countries into needless wars. Politics ends at the water's edge. You ever heard that saying? Well, we're in it now, boys, so we've got no choice to support the troops. Okay, so that is, why is he talking about the Powerpuff Girls, says AD. That's my little joke on, my little riff on girl bosses, because they're really thinking like 10-year-olds. Okay, so that's it for today. I'll be back on the air tomorrow at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern. Next week on a Theater Thursday, I'm going to be discussing one of the most famous films ever made and one of the most influential. It's a silent film, the first silent film I've talked about. It's from 1920. It's by Robert Wiene, and it's called The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. As previously mentioned, tomorrow on the book club, I'll be discussing an excellent book by anthropologist Robert Edgerton called Sick Societies. If you like the show, any part of it, and I'd appreciate it if you would click on the like button and subscribe to my YouTube channel if you have not done so already. If you would like to make a donation to this live stream, and as I said yesterday, I'm hello Chad Chadson. I'm coming up to a hard deadline on my rent, and I'm short, and so I could really appreciate or desperately need both, actually, donations. Thank you to those who have donated already. My PayPal account is linked to Kevin_Grace@hotmail.com. Once again, Kevin_Grace@hotmail.com. And if you are in Canada, donations may be made directly via interact at kevingrace@shaw.ca. Let's see. Seven Costanza says Dizzy is hotter and has better personality than Carmen. Yes, very much so. Hello, Dennis Dale, who says no, Emmett, Vietnam had nothing to do with Israel. Forever war is a euphemism for war on behalf of Israel. Okay, so again, I really could use donations to the live stream, but I will leave you with this. As always, in these days of social atomization and civilizational collapse, I do dearly wish that you, my dear viewers and listeners, manage to forge a genuine human connection in order to ease the burden. Good night.